life. And there's one particular thing throughout all of it that's challenged me. Obviously, people brought different things, and we've had some really good talks. I thought Aaron was brilliant, and we've had some really other good stuff as well. But there's something that struck me throughout all of it. And what struck me was the fact that Joseph, sorry, I was speaking on Jacob this morning, that Joseph didn't have to do anything for God to work his purposes with him. He just had to be in the right place at the right time. For those who don't know, those who are first evening with us, we've been studying the life of Joseph. And we've been looking from his birth right through his life, from various things that happened to him. So you'll remember that he was born, as we all are, but immediately his father takes a particular liking to him because of the circumstances of his birth. And it's not his fault but that's just the reality of where he is. He's born to him in a particular time, in a particular way. And his dad starts to favour him. As a result of his dad favouring him, his brothers hate him. It's not his fault, it's just the way it happens. And so when he brings to them a dream that God's given for their benefit, that dream is for all of them to benefit. I don't know if it was God saying, I'm going to do this, or this is going to happen, or asking them to get involved, but certainly he had a dream that was from God. And when he gave it to them, they absolutely despised him as a result of it. I think because they already hated him. Imagine that they loved their brother and he brought them that vision. If they loved him, then it might have been a case of saying, well, it doesn't sound quite right because it means that we're serving him. But you know what? If that's what God said, that's fine. But they hated him. They hated him already. And so whatever that dream was that God had given him, and however he shared it, they would have hated him anyway. And so he goes through this kind of roller coaster ride of this, his dad loving him like mad and making special coats for him and all sorts of other things. And his brothers hate him. Right up until the point where he ends up kind of being thrown into this pit. And you'll all know the story of this, how he gets thrown into the pit. So he goes from being his favoured son into the pit, then into the penthouse, then into the prison, and then into the palace. But none of it was his doing. He didn't choose to be in any of those situations. Does that stand out to anyone else? He didn't choose to be in any of those situations. He didn't choose to be hated by his brothers or loved by his dad. It just happened that way. And he didn't choose to get thrown down the pit. It just happened that way. And he didn't choose to get bought by a load of people who just happened to have a relationship with Potiphar and Potiphar's wife, and he gets sold into there and he ends up in this penthouse. He didn't choose that. And then he didn't choose Potiphar's wife to come and try and play a game with him. And so he ends up running out the house and ends up in prison as a result. He didn't choose that. And he didn't choose to go to the palace. He didn't choose any of those things. And yet God worked his purpose with him. Are you with me up to there? People going, yeah, a couple of nods, that's great, okay, yeah. So, you see what's going on is that his life is being led down this path, and he doesn't have to do anything but honour God in it. All he ever does is say, God, I want whatever you've got for me. He doesn't complain and he doesn't moan. The situations are up and down. He never takes the pride from being up, and he never says anything bad about being down. He's, I'm God's man, and I'll go wherever God takes me to go. He never forces God's hand, and he never complains about the situation. That for me is an incredible man, and I don't think I could do that. Because when I'm up and I'm having a good time, I'm a crazy person, some of you know me. Sometimes I'm like on cloud nine, like life is good and everything's good, and I'm happy and I'm like, yeah! And at those times I normally believe that somehow, with a group of people around me, we could actually change the world. That's when I'm up. When I'm down, it's just like, this is a disaster. And no matter how many passionate people we get in the room, we will never be able to do anything. And it tends to change depending on how I feel and how much food I've had and things like that. It also depends very much on how naughty my boys have been on a particular day. So Matthew particularly is a cheeky little so-and-so. And if Matthew's been naughty, then the chances are I'm a little bit frustrated and we can no longer change the world. And I'm blown about by my feelings. Anyone else feel like that? Anyone else get that sense that, you know what? My life, what goes on in my life, and my emotions, and then the journey I go on, actually changes whether or not God can change the world today. Isn't that utterly ridiculous? It's madness, it's total madness. God has a plan for us. I'm coming back to that in a moment. God has a plan for us. And you know what? My feelings don't really change God's plan. God is working out his plan. He's called a sovereign God. He's a ruler. He's the king of the world. He's the king of creation. He's working out a plan that just happens to include me, and that's a great privilege. But the minute I start to feel down about it, I start to waver from God's plan for me. And suddenly, God isn't as powerful as he was before. The truth, as we know, is that God is just as powerful. And yet my faith in him has dropped because of my feelings. We don't see that in this story with Joseph. It's a different one. So we've got Joseph who goes on his ups and downs, and the only thing he ever does is say, God, I want to honour you. But think of what happens in other stories in the Bible. I've got a couple of examples here. This is an interesting one because this is the story of Jacob and Esau. And Jacob and Esau is in chapter 5. I'll tell you why it's interesting. Because it sounds a little bit like something we've already heard tonight. This is chapter 25 in Genesis, the story of Jacob and Esau. It says this. This is the account of Abraham's son, Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of someone from somewhere. I've really stuck with those. I can't read very well anyway. And I'm hoping I'm right, so I'm not going to try. But she was a really important person. So, Isaac, I don't do that to laugh, it's a joke, sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but honestly, I'm really stuck with that words. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren, meaning that she couldn't have children. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled with each other inside of her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two people from within you will be separated. One will be the stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." God prophesied over those kids while they were still in the womb. God still does that, doesn't he? God still does that. God's still got a plan. And that's incredible the way God can still do that. So here's prophecy for those kids that God had already said was going to happen. God's plan was already in action. And if you follow this this through, right through the Old Testament and into the New, we see that Jacob was actually one of the descendants of Jesus. And God's plan was that always would be. While they're still in the mum's womb, God says, Esau, the older son, will serve the younger son. We come forward then to chapter 27, and we start to read of Rebekah getting frustrated with God and getting impatient and making this happen for herself. So God was going to plan this to happen, but she's got impatient. And it talks about Rebekah saying to Jacob, "Jacob, go and trick your father. He's about to give the blessing to Esau. Go and trick your father, pretend you're him, lie to him, tell him you are him, even put like bits of goat skin on your arms so it feels like him, it feels like the older brother. And we'll trick your dad into giving you the birthright." And the birthright was kind of a double portion of the blessing, and then I'd trick him into giving you the blessing, and the blessing was the inheritance. And he needed that inheritance to eventually become one of the descendants of Jesus. God had a plan. God was going to make it happen. But Rebekah got in the way and said, "Do you know what, God, forget you for a moment. I'm going to make this happen for you." The purposes of God still happened. Jacob still got the blessing, and Jesus was still born of that line. But their family ended up in a right mess. You see, what happens later on, in 28, 27 and 28, is that Jacob ends up having to run away, because Esau's going to cut his head off if he doesn't. That's the truth of what's going on. Esau is fuming with the fact that they tricked their dad, and that he's now lost his blessing. And so Jacob goes away, and Rebekah actually never sees the reality of the blessing. Rebekah dies while Jacob's off in the hills somewhere hiding from Esau, and when he returns, she's already dead. Because she schemed and tried to force God into moving quicker, she never saw the reality of the promise God gave to her. God's purpose was still worked out, but she missed out on the blessing. With me up to there? That's cool, great. So that's one of the stories. Story of Moses, similar to Jacob. Moses kind of found himself in Egypt, not by his own doing, but because he floated there. Talking about this idea that Joseph kind of was on this river that God was taking him down. Joseph was in the middle of this flowing river of God's plan, and his feet couldn't touch the bottom, and all that. God just took him to different places. This guy arrives in the river as well, but he's in his little basket, and you know the story of the Prince of Egypt, don't you? The story was that Moses was told by God that Moses would be part of the people who lead God's people into the promised land. You'll go and you'll become part of the upper class in Egypt. And as a result of that, you'll take my people from Egypt and you'll lead them into the promised land, because my people need to be in the promised land because it's promised to them. Does anyone know how many people Moses led out of Egypt? Anyone want to hazard a guess?
40,000.
So you shouted that, 40,000. It's a good guess. The truth is, nobody's quite sure, but it's an awful lot of people. 1,000, a couple of people say maybe it's 2,000. 40,000 is one idea. A couple of people say there was 1 million, and then they only counted the adults, and there was kids as well. An awful lot of people, whatever. A whole nation of people left Egypt. Anyone want to guess how many people Moses led into the promised land that God promised? 40? Anyone guesses? How many people did Moses... This is about Bible knowledge. How many people did Moses lead into the promised land?
None.
Who says none? Why none?
Because Moses wasn't allowed in the promised land, Joshua led them in.
Exactly. And what happened to Moses before he got there? He ended up going up a mountain and dying. Because he spent 40 years messing around in the desert instead of following God's plan. Now the thing is, God's plan was still worked out. Those people still end up in the promised land. But Moses never led them there because he started to try and do it himself. And people started to moan at him. He went and moaned to God and he said, you know what, God, you're taking too long. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to lead them. And he led them around the desert for 40 years. And he died before the people ever came. Yes?
Yeah, but did God know before his life that he was going to do the 40 years anyway? So God already knew that he wasn't going to make it.
I agree with it. I agree. But I think that in the purpose of God, if he'd have led them and followed God's plan would have been worked out with him.
Yeah.
And he chose not to follow God's plan. He chose to do it himself. Thanks for the question. And then dying for you got there. Let's have a look at another one. What happens in the story of Jonah? A whale, yes. Or was that a reference to me, Lauren? It's not funny, it's not even missing. Where does he get told to go? Nineveh. Okay. So Jonah gets told to go to Nineveh. Jonah, go to Nineveh because the people there are in a bad mess and I want you to tell them they're in a mess and I want you to tell them to sort their ways out because I've got a plan for the people of Nineveh. And what does he do? Nineveh's that way and he goes that way. Ultimately, God works out his plan anyway because the people of Nineveh get told and they turn from God, turn from their evil ways, and God saves a whole big city, the city of Nineveh. God still worked out his plan. But what a mess Jonah went through to get there. He got sick out of the belly of the fish. Now, I've had some bad fish today, and really, it's not good for me at all. I feel very ill. But imagine being in the belly of the fish. That is one stinky place. He didn't have to be there. He didn't have to go through the storm. I'm convinced about this. He didn't have to go through that. God worked out his plan. It's just that the minute he tried to go it alone, he ended up in a massive mess. I want you to consider for a moment what effect those bits of story has on you. And which one of those people are you? I tell you what, spend a few moments thinking about it. Are you like Joseph, who just kind of goes there and lets God take him wherever we go, or are you like the other guys? 2 minutes, which one are you like? Well, it's all quiet. Maybe I didn't explain very well. So again, I meant think, but use your mouth. Sorry, that wasn't. So discuss which one of those characters you're most like. Off you go. Anyone else want to give an answer? Any other thoughts? Yeah, lots of people pointing at you.
No, I had the same answer, but I think it's more a mashup of all the characters in the Bible.
Okay, yeah.
Which aim for Joseph's way in life.
Okay, that's a good answer, yeah. And we shouldn't be surprised, should we, that the Bible contains these stories that sound a little bit like us. Because it's not like God was just telling us a story. He was actually saying, guys, these are in the Bible because I want to teach you from them, I want you to learn a lesson from them. So two good answers, thanks. The truth that we know, and you've already mentioned it tonight, is that God does have a plan for us. God does have a plan. We already know that verse so well. Rob's talked about it, and Luke's talked about it, and I'm going to talk about it as well. This passage from Jeremiah, where God starts to speak. Jeremiah's been through this whole situation of difficulty, and then God says to Jeremiah, I know the plans I have for you. And then Jeremiah goes and shares that with the other people, with the nation. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. And let me say that to you guys, as Jeremiah said it to the people. God says to you tonight, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. How do we find out what that plan is? How do we know? How do we get onto it? Let's have a look at what Esau did. Isaac, remember I was talking a moment ago in chapter 27 of Genesis. Isaac starts to this process where he's going to decide who he's going to give his blessing to. And whoever he gives his blessing to inherits everything, his possessions and his position and everything that he is. From the moment he gives that blessing, it gets handed over. It's if a king dies and they say, long live the king. You've become the king because that one's died. With me up to there? Okay. So, the biggest decision of Isaac's life, who is he going to give the blessing to? Let's read it for a second. It's Genesis 27. If you've got a Bible with it. Verse 21. So, we've got this situation going on. Isaac's gone blind. And he's sitting in his tent, in his bed, essentially thinking he's waiting to die. The truth is he's not. He's got another 40 years in him. But he's on one and he's moaning, he's had enough, and he thinks he's going to die. And so he sends Esau, his favourite son, out to the field to go and cook this meal for him and bring him back so he can bless him and hand over his inheritance to him. But then Rebecca hears this and says, you know what, if you can get in that tent before your brother, then you can have the blessing, you can trick your dad. And so Isaac says this to his son. First of all, he says, how did you find it so quickly, my son? This doesn't make sense. How have you gone out and brought it back so quick? And then he gets told a lie. Jacob lies to him and says, the Lord your God gave me success, he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, come near me so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not. Jacob went close to his father Isaac and touched him and said, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. He didn't recognise him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So Esau is this hairy guy, and Jacob's got no hair on his arms, with no idea why. That's the reality. And so his mum, who loves Jacob, puts this goat hair onto his arms, and his arms feel hairy, and he goes into the tent. And so the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. He didn't recognise him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. And so he blessed him, and he said, are you really my son Esau? And Jacob replied, I am. Then he said, my son, bring me some of your game, and I may give you your blessing. And it goes on to say that Jacob brought him this food, and his dad Isaac smells him, and he can smell the field on him, he can smell Esau on him, because Esau has gone and left his coat behind, and Jacob's put it on. And so we end up with this situation, if you will. Go down one for me, and move out the way. He uses ratios to decide if his brother is the biggest decision of his life. And yet this is how he chooses who he's going to give the blessing to. Well, it feels like Esau, and it smells like Esau, but it smells like Jacob. And so he adds it up and he says, well, it's 2 of that and 1 of that. A ratio of 2 to 1 in rationalism. Rationalism says, you know what, it must be Esau. Isn't that ridiculous? The biggest decision of his life. And he relies on his own ability to count up the odds. 2 to 1 says it must be Esau, and so he gives him the blessing to the wrong lad. God worked out his purposes because of it. But wasn't that a ridiculous situation? I think we do that when we're trying to work out God's plan for us. See, God has got a plan for us. We've already heard that. Plans to prosper us, not to harm us. Plans to give us a hope in the future. And yet we kind of use our own minds to work out what's going on. We sometimes use statistics. There's a bit of a mad thing for you. We're going to the next one for me, just go one at a time. This is a bit silly, but you'll find it interesting. True or false? First one. Just go to the first one for me. True or false? There are people in the UK with no legs. I know it's weird. True or false?
True.
True. Okay, next one. There are people in the UK with only one leg. True or false? True. There are people in the UK with more than the average number of legs. True or false? Hands up who says true. Hands up who says false. Becky's training to be a doctor and she says true. Next one. You are one of them. True or false?
With one leg or no leg or with one?
That you are one of the people in this country with more than the average number of legs. Stand up everybody for me, let me have a little look around the room. Yes. Yes, everybody in this room, I can confirm, has more than the average number of legs. Mark, why is it?
Well, because the average is less than 2, isn't it?
The average is less than 2. Let's have a look to the next one. So there are some people in the UK with less than 2 legs. The average is around 1.999 legs per person. So if you've got 2 legs, you have more legs than the UK average.
Yes! That is awesome. Get it.
These some people are really proud of that now. This is the game. The work out the plan for your life was to have 2 legs. So I'm going to get sick now, we need to carry on. But the mad thing is, stats don't help us, that's ridiculous, isn't it? That just is nonsense really. But the truth, statistically, we've got more than the average number of legs. We can't use statistics and ratios and our own mind to work out what God's got for us. Next little bit of the slide for me, if you will. This is Proverbs 3, my son, don't forget my teaching. Keep my commandments in your heart, so they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck and write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you'll win favour and good name in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, so your rationalism or your list where you go, well, there's 10 good things and 2 bad things on my list of whether I'm going to go for this job or not. So I'm not going to go for it because it doesn't work. Lean not on your own understandings. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This shall bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Honour the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of your crops, and your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. That talks about how we get into the plan of God. The way we get onto the plan of God, the way we understand it, is to say, you know what, I don't understand, but I know that you do. And it's about spending time with God and saying, God, my only desire is to honour you. My only desire is to honour you. That's it. That's a radical message, though. It's a radical message. Why is it radical? Because it demands that in order for you to see the fullness of God in your life, you've got to be entirely sold out for Him. And I really believe that God is looking for people who are sold out for Him completely. Sold out meaning there's nothing left to give. You go to a shop and it's sold out, it means there's nothing left for you to have. And I think that's what God is looking for from us people, who are completely and utterly sold out. I've got nothing over here, God. I'm not holding anything back for yourself. It's like your 2 things. I'm not going to hold those 2 things back. I'm going to give you everything, God, for the hope in the future that I know you've got for me. The purposes of God are being revealed in this time, in this place. And I believe they're big things. I believe, like Rob does, that God is doing something significant. Rob talks about being on the brink, but I think God is already starting it. I think God is doing some amazing things. And He's looking for people who are sold out. People often say, is that for everybody? I'm not sure that's for me. I believe it is. And I believe the only thing that stops people having that is their own choice not to give it to God. I want to challenge you. Do you know when Martin Luther King, you know that story, don't you? That I have a dream speech. I heard some bad news. You know he nicked it. Yeah, it was never his, he never said it. He copied it off some other guy. Martin Luther King was a bit of a mess, to be honest, with the going up his life. But the story's there, I have a dream. Well, I have a dream. I've got a personal dream. For you guys, I've got a dream that one day Meg Burton will make the #1 single. Maybe, I'm not saying it's a prophetic dream, but I have a dream that I'll see that happen one day, and she'll change what the music industry looks like because she's done something special. You know what I mean? I have a dream that Anna Davenport we'll go to Africa and we'll share the gospel with people and change people's lives. I have a dream that. I'm not saying this from God, don't hear me wrong, I'm not prophesying over you, need to hear that very clearly. But I really want to see that in you. I believe that Graham Pitt's got something awesome that's going to happen with him. And the minute Graham Pitt says, you know what, this isn't about me achieving it, God doing it for me. God will do something really significant with your life. I have a dream that the young people of this peninsula will be so sold out for God that God will change what school looks like in this peninsula, that God will change what life looks like, that God will change communities and societies. I have a dream that Josh Newton will get up one day and lead an assembly, and the Spirit of God will fall in the assembly, and people's lives will be changed, and people won't want to leave the assembly room, teachers included. It's not prophetic, but wouldn't it be incredible? Because I think God wants to do those kind of things, and He's looking for people who are sold out for Him. Radical people who say, do you know what? The only thing that counts for me is that I am a God. It doesn't matter about my feelings, it doesn't matter about my emotions, or what I get out of it, and not get out of it. Look at the story that we've been looking at for the last 10 months. The story of a man whose only thing was that he was totally sold out for God. And he went up and he went down, he had some terrible experiences in prison, he had some incredible experiences in the palace. But despite all he said was, you know what, I'm going to be a man who honors God. I want to finish by reading something with you. Let's move on a second. And this is the Methodist prayer, and what I want to do, we'll read it together in a moment, but just in this sense of quiet, I want you to come and grab one of these from me, a pen off the table here. And just really quiet, I know this is a time when we can start to chat again and kind of think about what we're doing in school tomorrow. I really just appreciate it, just for the last 5 minutes, we just stay actually silent, that we wouldn't say anything. If you'll do that for me. Come and grab one of these, I'll put them on the table here, spread them out. First things first, come and grab one and a pen now, if we go. And what we're going to do is just read through it nice and slowly. Okay, so what I want to do is just to read through it nice and slowly. And just ask God, based on what we've talked about tonight, what is it that God is calling you to do? This is the Methodist prayer, basically, when they get together, they pray this prayer together, and our conference at YC, we do a similar thing. Read through it nice and slowly, and just pick out some of the bits that particularly stand out to you. What's God saying to you through this prayer? And if you want to do something, just write it down in those little gaps I've left for you. And then having read it, those who wish to will read it together. I didn't want to force it on anybody and say, read this together with me. And then we end up reading stuff that we don't believe ourselves. I believe it, so I'm going to read it. But take a moment just to read through it nice and slowly. Ask God to reveal some stuff to you from it, and then we'll pray together if you feel comfortable doing it. 2-3 minutes. What you might want to do is just make a statement based on that, maybe just a sentence at the end, just a statement that says kind of what you're going to do about it, some kind of what God's spoken to you tonight. And then we might just ask people to read one of those statements out if they wish to. Just a little really quick statement, a sentence testimony really. A couple of minutes to do that if you want to. Further over to you then, just for the next couple of minutes, if anyone's got a statement they want to just read up and say publicly, and we can just agree with you in that, that's great. If not, it's fine, but if you want to, please do.
Let me be full.
I will move from my past to God's future.
Want me to suffering, let me have nothing, I will follow God wherever he takes me. Don't care about the past, but be content with the future. Father God, because He is all you need.
Guys, let's stand together and we'll read this prayer. If you wish to, it's a radical prayer. I mean, it says some stuff like this. It's a dangerous prayer, but if you want to pray it, then let's stand together. I am no longer my own, yours. I'm no longer my own, yours. Put me to what you will. Rank me with whom you will. Put me to doing. Put me to suffering. Let me be employed for you, or laid aside for you. Exalted for you, or brought low for you. Let me be full. Let me be empty. Let me have all things. Let me have nothing. I freely and wholeheartedly yield all things to your pleasure and disposal. And now, glorious and blessed God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, you are mine, and I am yours. Amen. And as Martin said, the word amen means let it be so. And so a resounding amen from me over all of you. Let it be so. Amen.